Sweet surrender as I love, serve, and remember.
Freedom, which seemed appropriate since July 4th is freedom, but that's not really what came to me. So for me, freedom and love are intertwined. To have freedom without love doesn't feel very joyful or very full. So freedom and love. And what's on my mind, so it's hard to come up with a talk separate from it. So I just gave into it, which is this Saturday is my mom's memorial. And she's very present in the, I'm thinking about death, transition to the other side. And, people ask how I feel. And I don't feel like waves of terrible grief because she has had dementia for so long. I haven't had conversations with her for years. But there is no question something has shifted. And I think, this is what all of us have experienced. I don't think there's anyone in this room who hasn't experienced the transition of someone that you love, and probably multiple people. I mean, just as we get older, it just increases. As long as we're still on the planet, that increases. I just this past week, I heard about 2 of my classmates from childhood who have recently transitioned so early in their 50s, and it's always shocking. But it's just a constant way of being, this transition and the impact it has. And it's when you're going through it, it's like, wow, it's amazing how much we live life as if that death doesn't exist. And yet, not only is it going to happen to the people that we love, it's going to happen to us, that one day we're going to be the ones who are leaving, and there are going to be people who are going to be missing us. And so it's interesting to think about what is death and what's on the other side. And often when I ask people that, I'm surprised, especially when people are on the spiritual journey and say, well, I don't know and you can't know. And we know in our teaching, as soon as you say you can't know, well, you can't know. But I think it behooves us to wonder what is on the other side and what does it have to do with this side of the veil. And I'm not going to get into my views of what's on the other side or my beliefs. But I do think it's worthy for all of us to explore it because it is part of every one of our lives. It will continue to be part of our life. It's not going away. These ideas of wanting to live to your 500, I don't think of death as a bad thing. I think it's a wonderful reboot, and it always refreshes and renews. So, I think of one of the parables that Jesus talks about, and I don't know if this is what he meant, because I'm not a Bible scholar, but when I read it, it's the brides, and there's 5 brides who are not prepared to go when it's time for them to go, and there are 5 that are. And basically the message of the parable is, be ready, because you never know when it's going to happen. When I had my aneurysm, it wasn't like I was planning. In the month of August, I have it scheduled on my calendar, this is what's going to happen. It happens often, quickly, and suddenly to ourselves, to other people. And sometimes we have a lot of time to plan. Sometimes people get told when they're going to leave their planet. Some of you just finished Roots class. Thomas Troward, when it was his time to go, he went to his back porch, painted a portrait of the beautiful field behind his house, went onto his bed, lied on his bed, put the Bible on his chest, put his hands over it, and just left. And there are people who know when they're going to go, and then there's people it's total shock. We don't, but the point is to be ready. He was ready so he could die peacefully. But even if you're ready, you don't, it still seems shocking. Think of Yogananda. He basically knew it was time, he was getting ready to go. And everything was gearing up to that. But still it was shocking when it happened. He was at a party and he's sitting there eating and he just fell over. And his heart stopped. So being prepared, and I think of it also like traveling. When we want to go to a place, we've never been to that place. We don't know what that place is like. My sister-in-law was here 2 weeks ago. She's from Japan. She was telling us stories about how different the culture is in Japan than here. And it is and I've heard for years these different stories, and it's very, very different. And so I can hear the stories, I can watch movies, I can read books, but I don't really know what it's like until I go over to Japan. So one of the ways I learned to travel was the way my dad taught us as kids, was read books about it. Get to read about the places, the people, the history, the culture. So when we go there, and some people I know really start taking language lessons if you're going to a place with a learnable language. I'm not good at languages. Japanese is a little bit past my learning curve, but European languages. But taking the time to learn the culture, the language, the people, the history. So when we go over to the country or to the new place that we've never been, when we go to the East Coast, that whole other world over there, a whole other culture, we can feel it and embrace it immediately because we have all this stuff that we prepared. So when we go, it's a richer, fuller experience. We're alive, we're awake. We don't want to be, and I know people aren't here like this, but since I had my father was like this because he was an atheist, really believed this was it. And he always said he thought of himself like the guy in Remains of the Day played by Anthony Hopkins. It was a butler. And there's a scene where he's holding onto the cart and he dies holding on to the cart because he just and that's the image I kept having of my dad because he's holding on to this world so tightly. He hadn't prepared himself. And of course, life, as we all know, that the only thing that's constant is change. So we're always having many deaths in our life, relationships that end, jobs that end, life eras that end. Childhood's never going to come back for us unless we're reincarnated. So there's eras. So we're having little mini deaths all the time. So that's a incredibly powerful practice in letting go and releasing. And there's sadness with it, but there's also the excitement of what's to come. So in that vein, I wanted to talk, I was thinking about, well, how do we prepare? And I was thinking, even as we talk about preparing, when we're preparing for death, the more we prepare for death, we actually experience the new life even here. And as I was thinking of the three things, I thought, these are three things that really, sometimes we have a weekly topic about it, sometimes we might have a whole month on it, but really this is every week. I should really be talking about this every week because if we do these three things, we're going to start experiencing life on a whole new level. It's not about one talk or one theme or I'm reading a book and I'm doing a book group. This is about a way of life. And so for me, those three things are practicing the presence, forgiveness, and gratitude. We practice those things on a regular basis. We're going to start opening up to who we really are. Not to start, because I know you already have started, but continue to deepen and grow. We're infinite beings. So reading this gorgeous section by Gregory of Nyssa. I was just talking about this unending, we're infinite beings, unending learning. We just continue to learn, and there's always something new to learn and learn to grow. That's life eternal means life ever growing. So the first one, practicing the presence. This is the speaking truth to circumstance. This is what our entire teaching is really about, which is anything that we're seeing in the world of effect, experiencing out there is the effect. It is not the cause. So we don't spend our time and our energy trying to, we do want to, if we want to change it, the place where we want to change it is inside. Everything is happening within us. That's where all the work gets done, is inside of us. In knowing that this infinite one power, one presence, this one love, this freedom, this joy, this beauty, this abundance, the peace that passes all human understanding, all of that is inside of us. And we can work really hard to make it out there so I feel freer. So and these are all good things, but they're secondary. It's just putting things in the right order and starting inside and knowing freedom inside of me, knowing peace inside of me. And the way we do that is we practice the presence every day, all the time, as much as we can. So right now, there is a power and a presence that's infinite, that is love, that is behind everything that's happening. Behind me speaking, behind you listening, behind people online, behind all the services, everything happening in the cosmos. Right now, in this moment, behind all of it is this one power, this one love. And it's there, it's here, now. And to practice seeing that in ourselves, feeling that in ourselves, seeing it when we see somebody else, I'm seeing the face of God. I'm seeing the beautiful connection that we share spiritually. Now, when I first started practicing this, it was just a mental thing. It's like I don't actually feel the one power and one presence. I got the concept, but I don't actually feel it. And that's why we practice it every day. That's this practice. Can we know? Yes, we can know. We have so much writing from so many different traditions in so many different paths for centuries upon centuries upon centuries of people who've been practicing this and experienced it. And I know all of you, you wouldn't be here if you haven't had this experience before. That's why you're here. So it's not about, can I have the experience? It's how do I start living from that experience more and more? And that's a commitment to this daily practice of seeing the truth behind all circumstances and conditions at your work, in your relationships, in your money, in your food, in everything that's happening, to recognize that behind all of it is this pure spirit of wholeness, of love, of peace, of grace, of beauty, of health, of joy. To continue to see and know that and not get so, it's not we don't deny conditions. We accept that they're there, but we turn our attention back inside of us, and that's where the healing happens, is inside of us. And that is a constant, everyday practice. Practicing the presence every day. This is not a talk to inspire you other than to do the work, to inspire us. That's one of the things I do love being part of a spiritual community is every board meeting, every class, every time we get together, we pray in, we pray out, and we always start from oneness. But sometimes it can get, just like traditional churches, it can get rote. So then the question starts, and you get to play with this on your own, is how do I bring this alive again? Okay, I'm saying all the time, one power, one presence, it's infinite love and infinite joy. How do I bring this alive? So it's an actual, how do I bring it alive today? What's the little trick, the little fun thing I'm going to do today to bring this truth into a more viable, tangible reality? And that will be different for everybody. And often it's the books we're listening to, a podcast, or a song, the music. It's so important to hear music that inspires us, because everything in the world is trying to convince us our five senses are what's most real. So it's our responsibility to listen to music, to books, to podcasts, to television that reminds us to remind us who and what we really are. We are remembering who we are, and to do this regularly. I am remembering, great song to sing throughout the week. Practicing the presence. Forgiveness. So there was a time, when I thought my family was perfect, then my family, when I went to therapy and my mom left my dad, I realized my family wasn't perfect. I'm in therapy, and the therapist said to me, you need to go talk to your mom about this stuff. And I didn't think I could. And he said, no, she's strong enough, you can tell her. So I went and had my conversation with my mom of where I felt unloved. And she didn't agree with me. It was not a very successful conversation. And I was frustrated, but basically my family has this thing about don't want to be a victim. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess nobody really agrees with me. So I just accepted that this was how I felt, but that other people didn't agree, and we just went on. And then about 2 years later, I'm on a phone conversation with my mom, and she says something, and it just triggers something. And I got so mad, and not to her. I hung up, and my mind just went, and not for like an hour. I mean, it just went on day after day, and I couldn't stop it. I was just all that rage of not being heard, of not being, like she doesn't get me and thinks that she does, and blah, blah. I don't even, to be honest, I can't even remember, but I just remember it was intense, and I couldn't stop it. And I'm already on the spiritual path at this time, so I know this is not a good thing to have all these bad thoughts going on in my head, but I don't know what to do about it, so I'm praying like help, because I can't stop it. And the reason why I couldn't stop it is because I really believed what I was saying. I'm like, she should get how bad this is. I'm right. This was very damaging to my soul. Dang it. It's destroyed me. So I am very clear that what I'm saying is right, so I'm having a hard time getting to the forgiveness point, because why would I forgive her for something that she won't even admit, first of all? So anyway, I'll never forget, it was in this torrent, and it had been lasting for days upon days. And I went into the bathroom, and I was brushing my teeth, and I was in the sink, and I looked up, and the mirror was there, and suddenly all this weight came off of me. It was not of me. And I was looking, and I said I see it, but I didn't actually physically see it, but you see it with that spiritual eye, this lifting off, and it was gone. Like, I couldn't even remember what I was angry about. It was of spirit. The forgiveness happened, but it wasn't through my own ability. I had prayed and allowed spirit to take it because I couldn't do it. So I forgot. I mean, it was free. I was out in California at the time, and then I was a few months later back in Cleveland visiting my mom, and I'd forgotten about it. And we didn't hang on to the stuff anyways. It's not like we had these constant conversations. So we're out on her patio having lunch, and she said, Harriet, I've been thinking about those things you used to say to me about the way I hurt you. She goes, I think you might be right. And she started saying all the things I'd wanted her to say all those years ago. And I was like, wow. But I was healed, so I didn't need it from her. I didn't need her to say that. So where I was left with, well, it really is okay, Mom. And then I started having compassion for that part of her that couldn't see me because of the pain that she had been in unconsciously. And it was so effortless and full of grace that there was nothing but love and compassion on the field. Living a life of forgiveness allows us to experience the one power and the one presence. One of the things that's always can block us is I don't actually feel it because I have these things that I'm holding against this person, so I can't see them and they can't see me. She couldn't apologize until I forgave her. I now know that. Because all she felt, because she really did love me, and it hurt her so much to think that she hurt me, that she had devastated me, it was very hard for her to accept that. But when I think energetically, when I knew I was okay, then she's like, okay, now I can admit that because I know I'm not devastating you. I know I didn't destroy you. I know you're okay, so I can own my part of it. But these things are all the time. You hear the word microaggressions now. Well, we do microaggressions all the time. So there's big things to heal, and to heal them authentically and really and truly, not just because it's the right thing to do. I was listening to things about forgiveness, and it's a lot like, well, this is the right thing to do. It's got to be authentic. Go to spirit. Spirit knows. You can't hide things from spirit. So spirit knows if you're like really forgiving or just pretending to be forgiving. Get help. Get help from spirit, get help from spiritual practitioners, get help if you can't forgive. And then there's the microaggressions. These are the things that happen, little things that happen. We bump into each other all the time, and it's deep forgiveness. And even the microaggressions, this is another thing I learned, even the microaggressions require deep forgiveness. We say, well, that was just a little thing. But often those little things go dig deep, and we don't even know it. So we are constantly, this is why I'm saying this is a daily practice. Practicing the presence is a daily practice. Forgiveness is a daily practice. And the biggest one of forgiveness, and I know you all know this, I'm just reminding you of what you already know, is it's the forgiveness towards yourself. Because deep down, one of the reasons why we hold people prisoner, and that doesn't say that what they did was or wasn't wrong or right. But we hold them prisoner to it because deep down we also hold ourselves. Like, there's something I did. There's something fundamentally wrong with me, or I actually did something. And it's very hard for me to feel that, so I get mad at them and want to have to forgive them. So self-forgiveness, every day, self-forgiveness. How many times a day? How many times a week? 7 days a week. We forgive ourselves for all the ways that we're not showing up the way we think we should. And this becomes really important when you're on the spiritual path, because our ideals, I was listening to somebody, there's a great thing about ideals when we break our own ideals. We have our ideals on the spiritual path, and daily, at least me, maybe you don't, but daily I break my spiritual ideals. It's so frustrating. I really want to be a saint, and I'm so bad at it. I just fail every day. And I'm like, oh. Self-forgiveness. All those ways that we wish we had done something better, said something better, acted differently, whatever. Self-forgiveness, a daily practice of forgiveness. And then the third one, adventures with the microphone. And the third one is gratitude. And this is where we give thanks for what we already have. When we think Jesus said, all those who have, more shall be given, and those who don't have, more shall be taken away. And everyone says, well, what a cruel statement that is. But if you think of who Jesus' audience was, his audience largely were people who did not in the material world have. So he wasn't talking to people who were poor and saying, well, sorry, it's just going to get worse from here on out. I'm just talking to the Pharisees and the kings and queens. They have, so they're just going to get more. Obviously, that is not in alignment with his message. So clearly, that is not what he was talking about. What do we have? We have the presence. We are loved. We have that every single day, and to know that. So my mom was fueled. She was a person with incredible drive, incredible ambition. She self-described herself as both cheerful and aggressive. And all her kids said, yes. Accurate. And there's two things that fueled this incredible drive. I mean, her whole life, just drive. And the first one is she deeply and profoundly believed that it was important to make a difference in the world. And that if you are going to be on this planet, and you have, it is your job to do it for the have-nots. And so she always called herself cause-oriented. She was always in nonprofit organizations that were there to serve the world. That was her life. She tried, when she separated from my dad, she tried being a paralegal in a law firm, and that did not last long, because her life had to have this drive towards making the world a better place. She told us all the time it was her values. This is what mattered. And she drove that home to us, but mostly it's how she lived her life. So that was one of the fuels that drove her. But there was another fuel, that they're interrelated, but one's, it's sort of the same thing, but positive and negative. So when I was little, I was we went into the dry cleaners. I was in elementary school. And as my mom was doing the dry cleaning stuff, there was these two little kids, like 2 and 3 years old. They were so cute, and I'm playing with them and having the best time. And then my mom and I leave, go to our car, and I go, Mom, weren't those kids just the cutest things ever? And she goes, oh, Harriet. I was like, that was a weird response to such cuteness. And she said, I just feel so sorry for them. And I thought, oh, she must know them. Like, what? And I said, why? And she said, well, because of their skin. They were 2 little black children. And she said, they're just going to have a much harder life for no other reason than the color of their skin. At a very young age, she made me aware of how different our life was going to be just based on skin color. She didn't know them. Another time, we're driving through Cleveland, and there's a lot of poverty in Cleveland, and she intentionally drove me through some of the poorer neighbors, and she said, I want you to understand that there are people who live like this, and that you are very lucky to have what you have, and don't forget that, and do what you can. Another conversation. At the time, they didn't use the word neurodiverse, but I'll use it here. She said, don't ever make fun of neurodiverse children. She said, when I was little, there was a neurodiverse child, and people were so cruel to this child. She goes, I don't ever want to hear you make someone's life harder than it already is. You're there to help in any way you can. Those 3 stories come fresh to mind, and I think, like, where did this come from, this attunement to people who had less than? She did not take diversity classes. She grew up in a home that was middle class at best, middle to lower class. It was a row home in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Her father didn't have any more than an 8th grade education. Her mom went to high school, and that was it. She said, I don't think there was a single book in my house, ever. It just wasn't part of her world. And so I think the other thing that fueled my mother very profoundly was a sense of less than. She felt unworthy. She didn't feel like she was enough, so she was very attuned to other people feeling that way because she had it. But she couldn't talk. She could talk about other people, but she had a hard time expressing her own unworthiness. So it took me a long time into adulthood because she was very aggressive and cheerful, and it took me a long time, really into her 70s, till I realized she really suffers. She always, she'll be on a board meeting, and often she was the only woman, and she'd be telling us the story of what was happening and all her strong opinions and da-da-da. And I'm like, well, what did they say when you said that? She goes, oh, I didn't say it out loud. She deferred. She was too afraid to say things out loud. She was, so she had this very strong personality, but we knew it more at home. But out in the world, she had very strong friendliness, talked to everybody, but had a hard time. She did move into positions of leadership. She became the president of the League of Women Voters. But then I'm reading the letters between her and my grandmother. She's terrified to take this on. So my brothers see her as very sort of sure of herself and confident. And I'm like, no. She had very little confidence. She deferred to my dad all the time. He was much smarter than her. His letters, I can't believe he would even agree to marry me. Why would he want to marry someone like me? So behind the fuel of, I think she genuinely wanted to help people because she did feel like she had in many ways and celebrated what she had, but there was also that part of her that felt like she didn't have, that she wasn't worthy, that she didn't have enough. And that's the gratitude. She didn't have the spiritual practice of, Mom, you had everything. If you could only have just turned within and just felt that the love of God loves you just as you are. You don't have to keep proving yourself. That was a theme for her, is proving herself. You don't have to prove yourself. You are loved. Stop the fighting. You are loved. We see you. We love you. The divine sees you, and the divine loves you. So when we're practicing gratitude every day, this is so important, because all those unconscious things of our own unworthiness, of our own not enoughness, we're not educated enough, we don't look the right way, we don't have enough money, or whatever they're not, wrong gender, sexual orientation, color of skin, whatever those are for us, that will, Andrea Gibson wrote, the poet Andrea Gibson was saying that wounded people, unhealed wounded people, that's how we hurt other people, with our wounds that have not been healed. And so if we really want to shine our light on this planet and be the presence here, the lighthouses, as well as open ourselves to preparing for the next world, we have to heal our not enoughness by every day, not once in a while, not when it's a big crisis moment or a big challenge, but every day acknowledge that we are completely and totally loved by a pure spirit. Loved, not just that we are a vehicle of love, because often I hear people talk about I'm a vehicle of love, and they then start talking about all their service to other people. But you're loved. Receive the love. Receive the love. You are loved. That little child within you, little girl or little boy, you are completely loved as you are, not because you're perfect, but even all your imperfections, the things that you really don't like about yourself. Spirit loves those parts of you. It loves all parts of you, the weak and the strong. So we practice, I am loved. Reverend Andrea gave a great talk. I just thought, just looking at you, on receiving that, knowing we're loved. This is not just a one-time deal, but a daily thing. So we start practicing this. Now, it's hard to receive that love if we haven't done this forgiveness. See, they're all interplay. This is why this is like a daily practice. If we want to know who and what we really are and really live it here on earth and be ready with our heart and arms wide open as we move into the next space, or as people that we know, love, even, and I think part of this is why it's coming up with my mom's transition, because there are members of my family who haven't done this work, and so I see it. They can still do it with her on the other side of the veil, but there's still some things left over. There are blocks in their ability to really be grateful, to really love the presence as my mom, because there are some places that haven't been forgiven. Do the work now. Don't wait. Do it now. If there are places in your life that are going unforgiven, even if you think, well, I should have done it, I've been on this journey forever. I do forgiveness work every single day. Every single day. Not just once, not just twice, not with big, all the time. How am I falling short to my own standards? Because if I'm not forgiving myself, I'm certainly going to have a hard time forgiving anyone else and being a place of love. If I'm not receiving and knowing that I am loved with all my imperfections, how can I love someone else with all their imperfections? And if I'm not practicing the presence of spirit in my own world, how can I see the presence of the divine in other people? Then it's just words. So everything is this inner world, because the more the infinite cosmos is inside of us. And as we do this healing and open up our eyes, it starts showing up, just as my mother suddenly showed up completely different after the spiritual forgiveness. Everything is an inside job and on a daily basis. This is what our life is here for. And so when we have this love, that's when we're free too. To me, that's the connection with freedom and love. If we're not living in this open-hearted love, there's a spiritual teacher I was once trying to get the definition of what spirituality was, and it's an interesting thing. There's like a ton of definitions of what it means to be spiritual. And so the one I gravitated towards, I'm not saying I like them all, but this was, the teacher said, we become more spiritual the more we can open our heart to infinity. And anything that constricts our heart, anything, every day, that's when we do the work so we can open our heart back up to an infinity. That our job as spiritual beings on this planet is to open our hearts to infinity. That's the freedom. To have let nothing external constrict our heart. To let no relationship, person, circumstance, or condition constrict our heart. To not even let our own challenges constrict our heart, but to do the work of forgiveness, to receive love, so we can practice this presence of pure love and freedom all of the time. Yeah? Happy 4th of July, everybody. Happy Freedom Day, happy Love Day. Let's continue to do the work every day. I know you're already doing it, and this was just a gentle reminder. Let's pray. So we are here to love, to be loved, to know love, to feel love, to express love, to dance in love, to forgive in love, to heal in love, to do our bank statements in love, to write poetry in love, to bless all nations and countries in love, to bless all sentient life forms in love, to bless the cosmos in love, to let love permeate every atom and cell of our beingness, to celebrate the love that is within, through, and as every one of us, that we are this infinite cosmos of love, each and every one of us, a cosmos of love, pouring through every atom and cell of our being, pouring through our emotional body, our mental body, our energy body, and our causal body. On every level and dimension of our being, we are loved, we are lovable, and we are loving. We are it all, and we open ourselves and are willing to do every single day those beautiful practices that have been given to us of forgiveness and gratitude, of knowing that we have, so that we can be this love and express this love to the best of our ability in all of our imperfections, in all of the world's imperfections, in the midst of all the stuff of these circumstances of the being part of this world, in the midst of it all, love. Because this love is truly the one power, the one presence, the one light of our life, and we celebrate it here today. It is this love that sources freedom, that allows freedom to be such a completely fulfilling and joy-filled experience. This love is the Alpha and the Omega. We are here now, and we give a special blessing for this country as it continues to evolve, and there's so much divisiveness and pain. And I know it's happening all over the world, but as we're heading to July 4th, we are looking at the history and the culture of this nation, and all of the millions of stories that make up the history and the culture of this nation, the pain and the suffering that is part of this country. And we just hold in our hearts that behind all of it is this oceanic love that is more powerful than we can ever fully imagine. And it is this love that is guiding us and caretaking us into our next greater yet to be as the United States. And so this 4th of July, as we celebrate freedom, we celebrate freedom that is sourced only from and as pure, unconditional, unlimited love. And as we know this for our country, we know this for all beings everywhere, and we especially know this for our life. We are free, we are love, we are home right now. In deep abiding gratitude, I just say thank you, God. And in joy, we let this word be now as I invite us all to say together, and so it is.
I walk in God in all I do. I walk in God in all that I say.